Right, good evening, colleagues, officers. It's just 2 o'clock. We'll start the meeting. So welcome to today's meeting of the Highways and Transport Overview and Scrutiny Committee. As usual, the meeting is being broadcast live to the public. For those not able to watch live, the webcast will be recorded and made available for viewing on the County Council's website after the meeting. Before we begin, can I please remind everyone to only turn on their microphones when you wish or are invited to speak. I'll move on with apologies. We have apologies from Mr. Allen and Mr. Smith is substituting. So item 1 on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 26th of January. All pages are, well, the minutes are on 5 to 10 of the agenda. Have we agreed? Thank you, David. Agenda item 2 is question time. I've received 2 questions from Miss Rachel Wigington, who has joined us online. So good afternoon, Miss Wigington. The questions and their responses have been circulated to Miss Wigington and members of the committee prior to the start of this meeting and will be taken as read. I would like to remind members that no discussion is to be held on these questions. I will now invite Miss Wigington to ask supplementary questions, 1 for each question asked that have been asked. I would remind you that your supplementary questions should be to clarify the reply you are being given and should not raise any new issues. I would like to ask that you ask each supplementary in turn and an officer will respond. So over to you, Ms. Wigington.
Yes, hello, Chair. Hello, everybody. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to ask supplementary questions to the ones I raised before. I want to keep coming back to this active travel point with the council because it is so critically important to so many agendas right across the local authority. And at the moment, in my view, it's not seen as a strategic part of the transport and other agendas that we have. And I don't see anybody taking a really holistic approach across the whole portfolio. For example, in all the strategies and plans, active travel features in planning, in health, in net zero, in air quality, in high street generation, pretty much every agenda. And yet at the moment it sits in transport and it's very much behavioural rather than infrastructure.
Can you stick to your supplementary questions, please?
Okay, so the question is, in addition, is can we come back to this point about the person championing active travel, because it is such a key part of how we transform Leicestershire that I don't believe at the moment it's really being considered in that way. So I really want you to reconsider the approach around active travel and the person leading on it. So that's one of the first question. And the second question was around consulted with versus in partnership with. Yes, I was consulted, as any other member of the public was consulted in the LC whips, but that's not the same as true community engagement, which is more about a partnership approach. And so, you know, a trusted partner is completely different from a person that's consulted with. And I'd like you to go back round that, please. And I'd also like to ask when the first meeting of the Active Travel Forum that was mentioned will be, which month?
Thank you, Ms. Wigington. And I'll ask an officer to respond to those supplementaries, and that will be Jenna.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Ms. Wigington. What we're going to do is pop those answers in writing to you. The decision around the active travel champion was made in consultation with local members here and other staff. So I think it's right that we take that question back seriously and discuss it again, and also be able to provide that information on the Active Travel Forum for you in that format too, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Fine. Thank you, Jenna. Thank you, Ms. Wigington. Your now welcome to remain in the meeting, or you can leave if you so wish. But thank you for the questions, and as Jenna said, we'll respond accordingly.
Okay, thank you for your time, Chair.
Thank you. Item 3 now, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I've received no questions. Item 4, moving to agenda item 4 to revise any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent. I've not been notified of any urgent items. Item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Does any member have any interest that they wish to declare? No. Item 6, declarations of the party whip in accordance with the overview and scrutiny procedure rule 16. No declarations? No. Sorry. Item 7. Presentation petitions under Standing Order 35. We have one petition from Mr. Mullaney to save the 159 bus service, and we have received a supplementary report which was circulated to members, which is in response to the petition. Mr. Mullaney, could you present your petition, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon to the committee. And thank you to the residents who signed the petition. To get over 2,300 signing a petition about one bus route it shows the strength of feeling in many of the villages and towns that were affected by the 159 service being lost. Just to go through some of the arguments briefly, it's the only service that connects Hinckley and Colville, two of the largest towns in Leicestershire. It's the only direct service to Hinckley from many villages in the borough, including Balston, New Bolverden, Market Bosworth, and it's the only bus service remaining that served Stapleton, Cadeby and Nailston. And I was contacted by many people over the past few months who would lose out if the 159 service went. People who used it to get to work in employment, people who used it to get to college, people who used it for shopping and socialising. And there's an argument that the 159 should be stopped because of the reduced numbers using the route. However, many bus services have seen drops in numbers using them post-COVID. But as the country begins to get back to normal, we would hope that a service like the 159 could have been given more time to build back usage before it went for good. And at a time of a cost of living crisis, when people are struggling to afford to run cars, surely we should be keeping bus services like the 159 as an alternative to people using cars, especially when the government is continuing the £2 bus journey scheme for the moment. And obviously at a time when local roads are congested and concerns about that, surely having buses on local roads helps to reduce traffic as an alternative to car driving. And I understand there is the demand responsive transport being raised as an alternative, but this doesn't help those who needed the service every day to get to work or college. And also it's not being put on for particular routes on the journey. People in Market Bosworth, for example, who wanted to get to Hinckley weren't able to use demand responsive transport. So I understand why the savings need to happen, and obviously we've now passed the date when the 159 ceased. All I would do is make one final appeal to say that this is a service that lots of people wanted and valued. We've seen that by the strong response to the petition. And whether there was any attempt to get a reduced service, perhaps just around peak times in the mornings and the evenings for those who use it, and whether alternative bus companies other than Roberts might be prepared to take on a reduced service. So I present the petition today. Clearly, lots of people wanted to see the 159 retained, and even now at this sort of late stage, if alternatives could be found that could keep perhaps a reduced service, perhaps from a different company running it, then that at least would be something. But thank you for letting me speak today. Cheers.
Thank you, Mr. Mullaney. I'll now invite Jenna Walker, Assistant Director, to present the report. Then I'll come back to you, Mr. Mullaney, if you have any comments.
Thank you, Chair. So a copy of the report is available online, and I'll take you through the key points today, and obviously answer any questions as needed. So obviously the purpose of the report is specifically to respond to the petition that we received, recognising the number of signatures on that report. The service, as you said, operates between Colville and Hinckley, or operated between Colville and Hinckley, Monday to Saturday, and ran on approximately 90-minute frequency. And this requires a 2-bus working, which obviously then, as you're aware, resulted in a request for subsidy from the council to support what was a registered commercial service at £162,792 per annum. So we did talk to the operator around options for the future of the service. Our contract, or our commitment to continue that subsidy, ended in December 2022. At that time, we always sort of renew those arrangements against our policy to determine whether to continue those arrangements. So as part of that review, we talked to the bus operators around different models. They confirmed themselves that there wasn't too much they could do to reduce the subsidy. The length of the route is quite significant. The driver breaks, the way that works, didn't offer too much in the way of sort of ability to reduce that subsidy. I think as well, what was clear from there is there wasn't a confidence from the operator that the future subsidy of that service could be reduced, and in fact actually they felt that potentially that 162,000 wasn't necessarily covering all costs that would be required to support the service ongoing. And you've mentioned there, so in that context, as well as the financial context of the authority, we review that continuing subsidy with specific reference to the circumstances of the 159. So and the sort of key features of that are obviously the usage, but also about access. So as you mentioned, there are direct journeys on that route that can't be done other ways. Our policy in terms of subsidy from the local council, as opposed to commercial services, tends to focus on making sure people can access what we might term as priority or key services, so access to shopping, to banking services. And so that's done at a local centre and doesn't necessarily then obviously feature transport choice. And I appreciate that people would find that a difficult definition when you're talking about going to work. It's not a choice in that sense, but that we provide and focus on those main areas. So we did recognise, and I think it is important to note, we do recognise that there are journeys that now can't be done by public transport as a result of the decision. And as you said, what we've done is focus on making sure there is access to local services, either by existing bus services or by demand responsive transport. And there's an appendix to the report online that kind of sets out at different stops and points along the route what those alternatives are, and also the usage, average boardings per day on those sites. So the analysis of the passenger days did show that approximately a third of journeys were before 9 a.m. and after 4 p.m. There were no eligible scholars, so people travelling to school under our transport policy on the route. And we also then looked at sort of, again, the type of usage versus how people could make alternatives to that journey. And in light of that, the decision was made not to renew the subsidy on that basis. So for the communities left without access to the commercial services, then we've put on demand responsive transport, and that's kind of, that will have what we saw kind of getting a bedding in period. We'll obviously work with communities to make sure that goes smoothly, and they are, like you say, designed for low demand and will run to connect people to key services. So we recognise in making this decision that it will not necessarily provide people with their preferred journey or destination, and it will have an impact on people along the route. And in doing some of the work to look at that, we have, like I say, spoken to the existing operators, and we've worked through our local passenger transport policy process, notifying local members and the parish council. So having looked at the 159 service in the context of our current policy, obviously the decision remains not to reinstate the subsidy to Roberts, and that's all set out in the report for you. I think if it's okay, just to pick up on a couple of points that you made there around, are there any other operators that might want to register the service? That under the kind of legislation for public transport provision, operators are able to register services if they would like to and approach us about that. So if other operators and that service was likely to be viable to do so, those operators will do that and speak to us around it. And I think as well, taking on board your points around recovery from the pandemic impact on bus services, I think we're very much now in a area of thinking about what transport provision needs to look like moving forward, because they're, like as you say, the numbers involved in the subsidies are quite substantial. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Thank you very much. Mr. Mullany, do you have any comments to make?
Just a few, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the detailed report and for going through it. Obviously, the demand response transport, although it's there as an alternative, is not obviously a perfect replacement and doesn't allow for all those journeys that would have been available had the 159 still been going. In terms of students using the service, I know your figures didn't record any, but there are some who, because I was contacted by a head teacher who was a student who lived in Ibstock, travelled to Hinckley each day, and then I know of parents of a student in Hinckley whose daughter travelled to Colville on the service, but I presume if they're doing that independently, your figures wouldn't necessarily pick that up in terms of no students using the transport.
If it's okay, I'll pop in. Yeah, sorry, I should have been clear. So in terms of eligible scholars, there aren't any, but I think there are a small, small number of people using the bus, buying their own tickets to do that to school. And again, we appreciate that there is an impact on them. That there clearly is. But yeah, so those figures are based on eligible, and then there's 4, I think, scholar passes been bought commercially from Roberts for the service.
Thank you for that response, Jenna, and thank you for comments, Mr. Mullany. I'm going to ask now for comments from the floor from members. I do have Mr. Merry, Mr. Bill. Any others? Mr. Smith? Mr. Merry.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers for their in-depth report and obviously the follow-up report. I'd like to thank Councillor Mullany for getting involved with the petition. And I think if we were asked the question, we'd all want more buses. But then if we were asked the other question, will you use the buses? Most people say no. The transport demographics are changing across the whole of UK. Leicester County Council, the budget is under severe stress and we have to make savings and some tough decisions have to be made. And I know it's not nice for people who use the bus to go shopping, but if you've got a business that uses 162.7k subsidy and it's not making money and it's not financially viable, then at some stage you've got to make a decision about that business. And I've looked at the figures in depth, and maths was never one of my strong points. But for example, 3.15 boardings per day in Stapleton. I'm assuming that 0.15 person is quite small, but I see where you're coming from. But altogether, in the whole figures you're given, there's 219 boardings per day. And if you extrapolate that out by 31 days, you get 6,500 thereabouts. And that's still way less than 50% of the 2,388 people who've signed the petition, the signatures. So we've just got to make some tough decisions. And this is just one bus route in the whole of Leicestershire County. And we all know that there's other bus routes under review. And I do think that it's unfortunate, but we have to be realistic that the budget is very tight. And I think the officers have worked really hard to mitigate the impacts on the people who are going to be affected by this bus route. And that's all I'd like to say, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Merry. Jenna, if I can take these questions first, and if you can come back with your response, please. Mr. Bill.
Yes, thank you. That was a very good report, and a very this has been a first-class exercise in representing people. Jana, did I pick up from what you were saying that you haven't entirely closed the door on this, and that you will continue to review the situation? Because I'm just wondering whether, for example, I mean, look at alternative contractors, but also the question of could there be a peak hour service
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Jana, you happy coming back after 2 more questions and answer? Yeah, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Jennifer, for the report. Yeah, this is quite an emotive one because, like Mr. Murray said, we all want better bus services. But unfortunately, as I said in full council a few weeks back, the demand just isn't there. It wasn't there before COVID, and it is obviously it declined during COVID, and it's declined since. People are, for one reason or another, are just not wanting to use these services. Now, I appreciate exactly what Mr. Mullaney said about, there are certain cases that use this bus service, and, for those people, it's going to make life very, very difficult. But in a council where we have got a lot of financial difficulties at the minute, we've got to look at the numbers. And when you're looking at just over 200 people per day using this service, that works out at £600 odd per person subsidy per year. That's an awful lot of money to spend on a couple of hundred people in a county of 700,000 people. What the council are doing by putting the DRT on is compensating for that a little bit. So, if we go back to the numbers, the original numbers, so 2,388 people signed that petition. If 2,388 people were using that service, we wouldn't be having this argument. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mrs. Ack, sorry.
Thank you. I think one of the things that's interesting about the petition is not necessarily the service itself, the service 159, it's the fact that we are seeing 26 bus services under review. And in my own division, we've had trimming of bus services, changes at routing, and consistent changes to each of the services we experience, which is why the Labour group requested to last cabinet that actually we did a more detailed strategic review of passenger services across Leicestershire, which unfortunately wasn't taken forward. But I think we do need to have another look at whether or not the bus services we've got both commercial and provided subsidy to are fit for purpose and are serving the population the way it should do. Because I think there are some elements of this service that may well have been commercially viable if we'd done a trim here or a trim there, but we're not looking at bus service holistically. We're looking at individual buses every time we have this conversation. I think we need a wider look, and that would be my sense.
Thank you, Mrs. Ack. Before I bring Jana back in to answer, I take it there are no more comments from the floor. I must apologise to the portfolio holder, Ozzy O'Shea, who's joining us via Teams. Welcome to this afternoon's meeting, Ozzy. Is there any comment you'd like to make on that?
Well, obviously, we're a caring council, and we do our best to look after the community that we serve. But the figures do not stack up. If, as others have said, if people that sign the petition actually use the bus, then we wouldn't be in the position. And strangely enough, I'm away at the present time. I bumped into somebody 2 days ago, and they were from New Bolverden, and they said, well, we've got a knock on the door to sign the petition. So he says, I just signed it. He says, but I never use the bus and I don't intend to use the bus. The problem is we do need people using the buses to keep them going. And as Mrs. Hack said, a lot of the services that are commercial, that are not supported by this council, that are running, Arriva are running, they are late, they are not full. They're running around half empty, in some cases with one person on. And the problem is we're coming to a point now where even big commercial services like Arriva are cutting back. So my message is clear. If we want to keep our bus services, we need our communities to use them. And to be perfectly frank, I've been using it to go into town for the last 5 or 6 months to actually show support to use it instead of taking the car. People need to use the buses, and we just do not have the finances to actually put these massive subsidies on when we are in such difficulties with our council. So residents have my support, but unfortunately we don't have the funds to actually carry on doing this when the buses are not running full.
Thank you, Ozzy. Mrs. Zack, you wanted to come back? You're okay. Okay. Janet, would you like to answer those, please?
Thank you, Chair. So just to double check, I'm just going to pick up the points about the peak hour potential service and really the question of have we closed the door on the 159. I think from an officer and Leicestershire County Council point of view, it's fair to say that we've done the assessment and are comfortable that the decision we've made is in line with the policy. However, like I say, I think we'll always have to be aware of what is happening and changing out there. And if an operator wanted to approach us about the discussion, we would assess that offer in the same way against a policy. And I think it would be unfair of me to raise any hopes. I'm not aware that that is likely to happen, I'll be honest, but we would obviously consider any proposal that was put forward in that vein. Well, thank you. And then I think the other sort of question I picked out of the comments, Chair, was around that wider view. How are we making decisions on a network as a whole and as a service as a whole? And I think it's a really difficult thing to do, really, in light of the challenges being faced, and particularly the impact of the pandemic on passenger numbers in some areas. I think it's sort of, I'm sorry, just to indulge me a little bit, I think the history of our local bus policy is important here. So previous to this policy, we had a 95% coverage policy, and that policy was very much about giving services a chance to become commercial, making sure there was good coverage. And we went through that cycle, really, which, if you like, separated out those services that had the potential to go commercial, and then others that were always going to be subsidised. And that is the list that we are currently working through. I think looking at sort of the government messaging around Bus Back Better, around connectivity, wanting passenger transport and public transport to be a key part of our strategy, I think you have to sort of get a new baseline that reflects what we've seen happen over the last few years. And I think that would give us then the potential to look at where sort of traditional bus transport is the way forward, if you like. So it is a big bus, it covers those areas, and where perhaps more flexible options are the way to do that. And you'll see that we're trialling, we quite often reference the Fox Connect that we're trialling as a potential as well, so that we've got, when we come to look at our local transport plan going forward, that they are those options are taken holistically.
Thank you, Jenna. That was not quite the last question. Mr. Phillimore's indicated.
Thank you, Chair. It's okay, Janet. It's not a question. It's an observation, if I may, Chair. Picking up on both a comment that Mrs. Hack passed and what Jana has just very eloquently explained. There has been very visibly a fundamental socio-economic shift in people's behaviour. We can't change that. We're a county authority. It's not us to tell people how they must, get to and from A to B or B to C. What does strike me, and Jan has just mentioned Fox Connect. So Fox Connect is in my division, and picking up on Amanda Hack's comment about the review and where demand actually is, I actually think that the way we're seeing the demand responsive transport usage, it actually is demonstrating where the demand is, but not only where the demand is, where the demand wants to go. So actually, I think on behalf of, it's up to the officers and the lead member, one of the things that we probably want to look at in this sort of post-COVID socioeconomic shift, let's be real about this. We have ample businesses in Leicestershire who support work from home. 3 years ago, people went into the office. It's as simple as that. This council supports a degree of work from home. Therefore, we have numbers of staff, large numbers of staff, who are no longer going from A to here and back from here to back to A. So they are the realities of life that we have to deal with. But I think there may be something we can learn, and it's undoubtedly within the transport team's field of view, is what is the demand responsive transport usage telling us about what future provision probably needs to look like. And I think coming back to the financial issue, none of us deny that as a county authority, we are under financial pressure. I absolutely understand, the needs of 240 people who want to get from their home to work and back home again. But when money is tight, members know I have particular interest in a particular area of county provision. If I'd got £200,000 spare, I think I would be investing it in special educational needs, not in heavily subsidised transport that 200 and something people are using. I think that's the fact of life. But I do think there's a lot that we can learn from demand responsive transport. In my division, I see big double-decker buses driving through, either empty with 1 or 2 people on. What I also see is a rapid increase in usage of the demand responsive service on Fox Connect. So I think there's a massive trick that we can learn for the future development of transport policy. So that's it. Thank you, Chair. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillmore. General, I don't think there's anything you can add to that statement, is there? No. So, but thank you for your responses. Thank you for the comment. Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Please.
Mr. Chairman, if I just may add, as Cabinet to Sport 2, Ozzy, the lead member, I'd just like to say, seeing the other side of this, how proactive the officers are when we get notification that a bus route is to be terminated or that the operators are looking to cease the route happening. The officers are working extremely hard, and they are putting a lot of effort in to mitigate as much as possible the impact on residents. I've seen it in my own division. I do sympathise for the 159. I've had the X55 within my division go, but I've also witnessed how quickly the officers have turned round very difficult situations to put alternative measures in place. I had 23 students who had no way of getting to school, and that was turned round in a very short period of time of about 3 weeks. So I'd just like to commend officers for that and reassure members and members of the public that there's a lot of work that goes on underneath that to help reduce the impact to residents. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mrs. Wright. I totally agree with you. Thank you, Mr. Mullaney. I think that concludes the item, and we'll move into agenda item 8. This is a response to petition request for a school crossing outside of St Peter's Catholic Primary School. They're at pages 11 to 22. I'm going to ask Jenna to present the agenda item, then I'll come to you for comment, Mr. Bray.
Apologies, Chair. I keep forgetting that I can't move my chair forward. Agenda item 8. The purpose of this report is clearly, again, a direct response to a petition that's been received to request a permanent crossing on London Road, Hinckley. And this is outside St Peter's Catholic Primary School, which is located on the London Road in Hinckley. And this area, again, has got quite a mixed use. There's residential and some commercial business in the area as well. Again, this report has been online, so I'll just summarise the sort of key points of the process, and then obviously take any questions as well. So, there's a kind of industry standard way of assessing the need for a crossing on highway roads, and that's something that we've undertaken to look at in this case. And I think this has been an ongoing discussion, it's fair to say, with the school, local residents, and concerned parties, probably since it says in the report there 2017, 2018, where we have been unable to fill our school crossing patrol vacancy. So since that time, we've been working with the head teacher in the school. We have undertaken surveys of the area, and if people want to, in the report is a bit of detail around the features that are already present at the school. So there's the waiting restrictions there. There's mandatory school keep clear markings. We have vehicle activated signs, a school safety zone of a 20-mile-an-hour area, and there is an uncontrolled crossing point outside the school with tactile paving, and it's a lit area as well. We've also done surveys that are set out there around road accidents and vehicle speeds, which we take into account when looking at requests for crossing. And coming on later in the agenda, there's a report on how we collect that data. But specifically, we use information that's been recorded and validated by Leicestershire Police, and we use it from a Stats 19, what's called a Stats 19 report. So that's reported personal injury accidents. There's been none of those recorded outside the school during those drop-off and pick-up collections within the last 5 years. So reviewing that history, there was no immediate concern over the accident record outside the school, and the speed surveys were in line with the speed limit as well, with the 85th percentile there, which is again a standard measure of speed, being recorded at 30 miles an hour. And again, in the morning and afternoon school run times where those signs are activated, there's 28 miles an hour and 29 miles an hour average. So we take all of that background, and then we undertake an assessment, what's called a PV squared, which effectively kind of evaluates the demand for a crossing in the area. And I won't go through the technical aspects of it. They are set out in the report, but consistently that this area has fallen short of the standard criteria for implementing a crossing. And the reason there is national guidance around where you put crossings, and that we adhere to that guidance, is because where there is no demand for crossing, it can be more dangerous to have one, given the sort of, or can be cause danger or hazards because drivers aren't expecting to stop at the crossing, for instance, that type of thing. So we stick very much to the guidance around the installation of crossings. And you'll see in the report as well that we have agreed, I think, given the level of concern in the community, that we will repeat those surveys in June. We find that it's a good time to do that because it's the most likely time that people will be out walking to school. Schools are still in term time and you've got the levels of traffic. So we've sort of we've been through that assessment and concluded that the crossing wouldn't be justified of itself, but again, we do recognise the concerns around the school crossing patrol and have been recruiting to that role, and we are encouraged by the fact that we have had a recent application which has gone through the process. There's some pre-employment checks and clearly safety checks that we do when we appoint school crossing patrols, and they are in progress. So we're hopeful that the school crossing patrol there can begin work very, very soon. We've also undertaken, and they're set out in the report, some highway improvements around the sort of looking at the area, how we can manage that. We work with schools to undertake road safety, education, and travel initiatives. And again, in the report, I won't read them all out for you, Chair, but paragraph sort of 28 down to 26 down to 34 have got those initiatives set in, and also things we're doing more widely to look at improving access and ability to walk to school. Also then at paragraph 38, there's some proposals for parking changes that are set out in the report. And then we move into kind of the report concludes that having reviewed the decision and looked at the evidence on the basis of the petition, we still don't recommend introducing that formal crossing, but there are measures being introduced that would, to address the concerns, particularly with the school crossing patrol, and that would be our sort of response to the petition. So I'll leave it there if that's okay, Chair.
Thanks, Jenna. Mr. Bray.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you for letting me speak, and thank officers for the report, the detailed report. Well, clearly a petition of nearly 9,000 people shows the strength of feeling in the area for this. I think in my 14 years here, it's one of the biggest petitions I've seen. And it's not just people from Hinckley, as Jenna said, it's the Catholic school, so it has quite a wide catchment area for people choosing to send their child from sort of slightly further afield to that school. So it gets quite a lot of people walking and driving to school, which causes mayhem in the morning. I particularly want to thank Joe Thompson and the other parents who spent a considerable amount of time collecting the signatures for this petition. I would have obviously liked the response to me today that the County Council were going to put a crossing in as soon as possible, and disappointed that it isn't going that far, but I do welcome the changes that are proposed. I particularly welcome the news that the
school crossing patrol is potentially crossing. As members who've been around a long time will recall, I've raised this at several county council meetings through questions to lead members. I even dragged Blake Payne, when he was the cabinet member, to the school to listen to the children about this. So I do thank people for their engagement on that, and I would very much welcome the crossing patrol being recruited sooner rather than later, and if I could ask to be kept informed about how that's going, I would very much appreciate that. There are a few issues I do want to just pick up in the report, though. Firstly, it's referred to in the report as a school crossing. Clearly, the main driver of this is around school times and the safety of the children at school time, but it will have a much wider community benefit. Anybody who does know this part of Hinckley will know that it is in a busy town centre location. Traffic is coming at you from all directions, but it's not just children going to school that cross here. People who are accessing the GP services, the shops, the leisure centre, even further afield to the bus and railway stations, do walk this way. It is on a GITI network, so it will have wider community benefit, not just for the school. I just would comment on the injury data. I accept what's said about fatalities not being in the last 5 years, but there has been fatalities in this area. As part of my meetings with parents and other people concerned about this, I did meet the widow of a man who was killed on London Road a few years ago, who believes very strongly that he wouldn't have been killed if there had been a safe crossing in this location. So we do have to be slightly careful about what we say on that. And it's obviously clearly very disturbing that we can't take into account near misses. I would hate to be sat here in a few months' time, with another report because some child had been killed when potentially they couldn't. And we've had a great deal of parents making comments about near misses and how it is more luck than judgment in some cases that we're not sitting here with bad accident data in this location. So I do look forward to the surveys being redone again. I think I've noticed that they have got closer and closer as the years have gone by, which is not surprising because the amount of traffic on our roads and other things is increasing. And I just will remind officers in the council that myself, Mr. Mullaney and Mr. Bill have said that we're prepared to use money out of our member highway funds for 2 years to fund some sort of crossing in this location. And we put that offer on the table when the bidding process was still open, so we can't be accused of doing it too late. So I would ask, I thank officers for the work done so far. I look forward to seeing the revised surveys being done, and I look forward to the crossing patrol being put in sooner rather than later. But I would urge the county council to consider putting the crossing in this area sooner rather than later. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bray. Jenna, if you're happy, I'll take comments from the floor then, if you can come back. We have questions from the floor? Mr. Bill?
As you know, I didn't intend being here this afternoon. I thought it was too dangerous to attend.
Well, I'm mindful of the time,
But,
Mr. Bill,
I have
because
come in, and as Stuart has pointed out, the three of us sitting in this position are the people who actually used our members' highway money as a priority, really, to try to get this crossing there. And I hope that cash stays in the system and doesn't just disappear. And as Stuart has pointed out, if you look at the report, it is an excellent report, and there are some, there's some very positive measures to come out of it. I think the magic figure is 0.4 something or others. Now, I think it says in 2017 that figure was 0.2, and therefore didn't qualify. And then 2019 that went up to 0.3, or rather more than 0.3, and of course that's 4 years ago, isn't it, by my maths? So I think you take a straight line graph, the chances are we've now hit the 0.4 already. So as long as we can keep this under review, and let's hope we can keep the money in place and keep the hope alive that the crossing will go in. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Just a comment from me, Jenna, if you don't mind. Page 16 of the report, which is a very good, excellent report. Page 16, 27. The Sustainable Travel Team. It says, I think, numerous occasions have tried to help the school since 2017 with initiatives to try and reduce school gate congestion. Why is it taking so long for the school to take that on board now, since 2017? I then noticed that there's 15,000 set aside, is it, for parking improvements? And I'm interested in this. So I'm just seeking approval if we could bring this back to this committee at a future date after the June 23 assessment, so we know where we are. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm going to start from backwards. Bringing it back after June, not a problem. And I think, again, taking on the board those points, because clearly from a professional engineer point of view, these decisions aren't, they don't want to prevent a crossing if one is needed. So if that data changes, if that demand is there, and we see that, don't we, with perhaps in some cases new schools or new developments, that things change and we need to keep an eye on that. And so that's no problem. We'll bring that report back and take on board that point about keeping it under review. I think just a couple of other points in terms of the engagement with the school. We tend to invite schools on an annual basis to take part in that, and I think it would be unfair of me to comment on perhaps the reasons why the school found that difficult. It could be resources or other things, but I think the good news is we are engaging now and working on that, and that's positive. And I think just the other point to say about the funding, and I think, clearly there's commitment from yourselves in terms of that. I think it's just to say from ourselves, when it comes to crossing criteria particularly, funding isn't the first criteria for us, and it's actually about making sure that we're consistent from a safety perspective of where we put those signs. So crossing, sorry. So appreciate that. Oh, and like you say, that's something that that funding is there, but it's not the deciding factor for us as officers in the case of crossings. And if that helps to understand for members of the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Janice. So no other comment. Mr. Fillimore.
If I may,
I'd appreciate it if you could get in before Janice sums up.
I'll take your guidance, Chair.
Feel free, Mr. Fillimore.
Thank you. It's just a thought that's just gone through my mind is that, as the Education Authority, we build schools. And I just wonder if there's an opportunity, and I accept highways and schools and planning are completely separate, and they should be completely separate technical entities. Is there an opportunity that as we are bringing on new schools, that actually part of that design and planning process is, should we put a pedestrian crossing immediately from the outset? Now, where I am, we have Badgebrook School, and I got the weirdest feeling the pedestrian crossing was in there at inception. And so I just wonder if there's an opportunity moving forward. We can't change history, just moving forward, if the collective technical teams could actually just have that slightly wider view. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Fillimore. Jenna, is there anything further to add on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I can perhaps just offer a bit of reassurance. Obviously, some of the issues that we're talking about tend to be around schools that have been in place a long time and things have grown up around them. We do provide some technical guidance to school planners or developers, depending how schools are being brought forward. With sort of dedicated pick up and drop off areas, reducing the conflict with traffic. So hopefully we're on to that. Not to say that it will, it couldn't be improved, and we'll keep looking at it, but that discussion is happening, and I think that's a positive.
Thank you, Jenna. Keith, another one.
I would just like to back up.
You're doing homework.
Jenna's just said we've got a school being designed and developed in Ellistown as part of the Swinfen development, and it was held up for many months because of the safety of the school children drop-off, turnaround, car parking spaces, all been resolved. Great effort by everybody involved. Hopefully that's going to get the green light, and we'll build a school very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murray. No need to answer that then, is there? No. So, Mr. Bray, thank you. Mr. Mullany, thank you. You're more than welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or? Thank you. So, I wanted to give as much time to those two items as possible for the lead petitioners to get their, petition over. And thank you for the responses, and thank you for the comments. But now we're moving on to item 9. I'm going to ask officers to be as brief as possible with their reports, because, as I say, I'm mindful of the conditions outside, and we'd like to probably get home a little bit earlier than what we thought. So I'm going to move next to our agenda item 9, which is the Environment, Transport 23-24 Highways and Transportation Capital Programme and Works Programme at pages 23 to 74 of the agenda pack. The views of the committee will be reported to the Cabinet when it considers this matter in April. Jenna, I believe you're presenting this report.
I am, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, in the interest of being brief, what I'll do is I'll just give you the headlines and come back and ask me any questions if needed. So this report sets out what is broadly the Highways and Transport section's works programme for the year. So that includes our capital work, so things we're out building, but also key work priorities for the financial year 23-24. So a report we bring to you annually to sort of highlight that work, and also what's changed around our area of expertise, what the priorities are, what the challenges are, and hopefully opportunities as well going forward. So in Highways and Transport, we developed this plan to reflect corporate and departmental strategies, things we're already signed up for, and also where appropriate with our partners, things like Midlands Connect, try and maximise the effort we're putting in for the benefits that we can get out of it. So there's a clear focus on maintaining an efficient transport system, and you'll see from the report, though, that we're kind of highlighting some of the difficulties in maintaining that with the current constraints. But what the report does as well is focus on how some of the work that we're doing can put us in the best position to secure external funding and keep investing in Leicestershire's network. And I mean that across not just the highway network, but as we've been talking about, active travel, passenger transport networks as well. So those constraints probably and those issues won't be a surprise to you. There's demand arising from kind of the global population, I say global across Leicestershire, population and economic growth, but also where that comes at a local level for development as well. There's the condition of our highway asset. We're seeing we've got a lot of highway network and assets such as street lighting, for instance, to maintain, and a cost of that is obviously a concern to us, as well as maintaining that condition. And then, of course, there's financial constraints more generally. So you'll have seen that in the past, perhaps in Highways and Transport, we forward funded capital schemes in order to bring together lots of impacts and mitigate them all at once. You'll see that we're going to restrict that to current commitment schemes that we're already doing that on. We've got inflationary impacts on our capital programme, and we've got a fairly, I'd say, sporadic approach to being able to get external funding in. So funding opportunities coupled with materials and skills shortages just make a challenging environment for us to deliver this work. So ultimately, the report concludes that the work programme will positively contribute to the goals that we have as the council, and particularly in relation to the Highways and Transport agenda, but it is increasingly challenging to manage that demand, and apparently to say it in a traditional way. And really what we're looking at, and what I've mentioned, our local transport plan development before, the pace and cost of the impact of that growth is likely to require a fundamental change in behaviour in order to meet our ambitions around carbon, manage impacts of congestion, looking towards the future. So the report and appendices contains more details on the individual elements of that work, and I'll leave it there, Chair, if okay.
Thank you, Jenna. We're asked for comment for Cabinet. Do we have comments on the floor? Mr. Phillimore.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Janet. I only have two. One is a question. Supply side. How concerned, or is there any concern? We all see great presented reports here, very clear, very detailed, fully costed, but we are living in a world of supply side challenges, and I'm just wondering, as a risk factor, if you can, magic crystal ball and all that kind of stuff, what we perceive, or do we perceive any risk on delivery versus cost because of supply side challenges? This and it is interesting because metaphorically, I understand that within about 5 seconds of when we'd finally approved the funding for Melton Distributor, the spade was going in the ground. It was a very fast takeoff on that programme. So well done for that. But my second question is actually something that never crossed my mind, is the impact of heavier vehicles because of EVs. And how do you propose as a department, or how are you kind of forward predicting the extra impact on the highway network? Because clearly, if it's 30% heavier, there's it's just going to wear the surface out quicker, and indeed perhaps the substructure. Because of course, correct me if I'm wrong, the technical design is based on what was, not is what necessarily is. So I'm just curious, idle curiosity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Phillimore. Mrs. Ack.
Thank you. Just am I allowed to just quickly mention the report afterwards because they're connected? So on page 57, it identifies there's going to be some resurfacing along the Narber Road South, Braunston Lane East. And then on the next report, that area is second in terms of number of accidents at that location, but there is no, it's been looked at and no improvements have been required. Is there any way we can have another look at that? Because we're going to invest on resurfacing. Could we have another look at that area before we commit that spend, please? Thank you. Sorry.
Mr. Bill.
Agree with what Mr. Phillimore said there. We looked at this. I'm afraid it must have been 30 years ago when we looked at heavier lorries coming in from the continent and insufficient infrastructure to withstand with respect to bridges, for example. But the most frightening thing about this report, I think, is paragraphs 56, 57 and 58. I know I keep on saying the same thing to every meeting I go to. It's a sort of party piece, really. Which, okay. And we are being overloaded with development in the south of the county, all over the place, concrete from wall to wall, air to air, how you want to describe it. And yet this report here says that all this growth cannot be sustained because we can't afford to maintain the roads, basically. So either we've got to look again at all these growth figures, or somebody has got to someone's got to do something about the infrastructure. We're out of, the whole thing is out of kilter, isn't it? And I think we really ought to just reflect this in the report that we send on to the cabinet. I know everybody knows it to be a fact, but I think we've just got to underline it at every case that it's not all coming together in a grand plan. It's rather sort of going in the opposite direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bill. Would you like to comment on those, Jenna?
I'll do my best, Chair. If I've missed anything, please let me know. So in terms of the question around supply side risk, I think both Pat and I would recognise that as a significant risk to our services. There's sort of our own supply in terms of retaining people here and not having them go off to competitors on industries. We've got HS2, we've got a large development activity. They're kind of the industries that perhaps attract our people away. Those are also the ones perhaps where we're competing for materials or other resources as well. So I think there is that risk. We are working proactively to manage that through our contracting approaches, through our retention policies. But I think it is a risk and one mentioned within the programme. In terms of forward predicting, I'll be honest and say with great difficulty we're doing that at the moment, because there is a mixed view on what the answer to some of these challenges are. So, for instance, you think perhaps a huge move to electric vehicles might solve a lot of our problems. We come up with another problem to solve, so that type of thing. I think there is starting to be emerging guidance. So we're hoping government will release our local transport plan guidance, which will help make some of those decisions. And also there was a recent sort of a study done at a national level. And I think what it largely concludes, and it probably won't surprise you, is what we're going to need is a mix of alternative fuels, a mix of approaches, and things like perhaps lessening some of the burden on the network through short journeys, moving those to active travel, that sort of thing. And that there's not going to be one magic solution. And I think there will be things that are trialled and failed along the way in order to do that. And we'll of course be talking to you about those opportunities, I think, over the coming years. So, and then in relation to your question, Mrs. Hack, I think the answer to that is yes, we can. Let's have a look at it. I won't make any promises, but let's certainly have a look if there's anything else there. And I suppose I'll just offer on the growth versus demand that as a highways and transport service, we do work really quite proactively with local planning authorities to try and anticipate the impacts of growth and plan and mitigate for them. I think as well around the management of the network, and we will need to review our approach to that ongoing and make sure that we're doing the best we can to invest in the network as best we can to get the best outcomes for it. I think what this report is confirming is that's a challenging thing to do, and as you've discussed already, there may be difficult decisions arising from that along the way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jenna. Any last minute questions from the floor? No? Okay. Thank you. Mr. O'Shea, any comments?
No, I think Jenna's answered them quite amicably. Thank you. Nothing to add. I wish you all, a safe journey home as well. But I'm told now that it's coming down quite fast.
We're not quite finished yet, is it?
No, I know that.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you, Jenna. Thank you, colleagues. I'm going to move swiftly on to item 10. Road casualty reduction in Leicestershire. These are at pages 75 to 156 of the agenda pack. I would also like to welcome to the meeting Mr. Graham Compton, Senior Traffic Management Officer at Leicestershire Police, who hopefully will have time now to summarise his information following Jenna, who will introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for giving me.
Sorry, Mr. Compton. Can I just allow Jenna to introduce?
Sorry,
report,
Chair.
And I'll invite you back in. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Graham. I'm always loving your enthusiasm. So I think there is a lot of information in this report, Chair, and I think to summarise it, probably best just to set out what's contained within it. There are a few appendices in there as well, and a lot of important data, and clearly, road safety is at the heart of what we're trying to do as a service. So I think rather than sort of pick out key bits and miss out others, what I'll do is set out what's in the report, and we can pick up from there if that's okay. The purpose of this report is to provide the committee with an update on a number of issues relating to road safety. It's got the road safety casualty statistics up to the end of 2021, and they're done. You'll notice we're a year behind really with that in terms of how the data comes through, gets validated and analysed. So just to point out, that is the data to the end of 2021. We've set out what Leicestershire is doing in response to those figures and our approach to casualty reduction in general. And I think it's just important to mention, and clearly Graham's here today, that we do a lot of that in partnership. We've got Leicestershire Police's then approach and their role in that partnership, and there's a set out in an appendix, and Graham's here today to talk us through that. I just then point out in particular, we're asking the committee to note this time that we're changing medium and long-term road safety targets, and they're set out in paragraph 61, and that's really to take up the challenge of reducing road killed and serious injury accidents, they're called summarised as KSIs, down by 40% in the medium term, and then we're aiming for a zero deaths by road casualty by 2050. And then the other thing that we would just highlight is that when we intervene in road safety issues, we look for patterns of accidents or collisions. We're suggesting that when we look at our rural routes initiative intervention, so that's a route rather than a cluster, we keep that threshold at 7 instances in line with our other policies, so we can be consistent and have a baseline for intervention. There's a lot of background also set out there, and as I say, data relating to the performance set out in the appendices, as well as the actions throughout the report. With reference to sort of the time considerations, I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Mr. Compton, are you able to summarise the information you have for us today?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be as quick as I can. I'm conscious of the weather. All our officers are out there battling with it, and the RTCs, etc. But thank you very much. Thank you, Jana. Got a very close relationship with Jana and all the officers at County Hall. I just want to briefly mention, Chair, the Road Safety Partnership that Jana's mentioned. We started this in the mid-90s because of the high level of casualties, and I'm pleased to say that since that time there's been a tremendous amount of work done and casualties have fallen, although of late, to be fair, they have levelled off and there's an awful lot of work to do. But Jana chairs our partnership board and has done for the last couple of years. Underneath that board is the management team who do a lot of the spade work, digging out the statistics, looking at emerging issues across the county, and making recommendations to the board. We've then briefly we've got 3 working groups: the communications and publicity, which sells our campaigns to the public; the data group to dig into the RTCs that is happening at various sites that we've already mentioned today; and also governance of the road safety unit. And the road safety unit deal with all the offences that are happening on our cameras throughout the force area. So that's the way it's structured. We've had a very busy year. We've concentrated on our vulnerable road users. I want to mention those briefly later. And also on our community speed watch scheme, which we have done a thorough review on. And again, I want to mention that in a couple of minutes' time. I also want to talk briefly about some of the issues that I know the councillors tackle on a daily basis. And one is the emergence of e-scooters and electric cycles, both of which are causing problems across the force area. And of course, now we've got the emergence of e-scooter serious collisions. And you probably know that we had a child very seriously injured over the weekend in a collision with an e-scooter. So I just want to mention that we are on top of emerging issues, and we like to think we know what is happening across the force area. Just as a reminder, the partnership consists of representatives from all the emergency services, the National Health Service, the 3 local authorities, and National Highways, formerly Highways England, and that representative deals with issues on the strategic routes. And I know you've just mentioned a lot about lorries. Lorries is a major issue for the partnership, and so we do engage with National Highways. Briefly, last year, and I think again this is important for members, the board approved a sum of £200,000, which came from the funding of people attending our speed awareness courses as an alternative to taking the points. And though that £200,000 was spent on a variety of road safety initiatives across the force area. And that funding is very important to us. And I'm very pleased to say that that funding is now available for the next financial year. I'm going to skip 1 or 2 items on my report, but I just wanted to mention that briefly that in 2022, we had 162 road fatalities across East Midlands forces, and this was an increase of 9 on the previous year. And it does illustrate that post-COVID, the levels of movements on the roads now are back to where we were in 2019, and of course, come with it come more accidents. So we've got a lot of work to do. Our number of fatalities in the force area last year was 32, and we really want to get that figure down this year, if at all possible. I just want to mention enforcement, Chair, because I know we get a lot of queries from the council representative, quite rightly, to find out what we're doing on enforcement. I'm pleased to say that the force did have an increase in officers last year, which meant an increase in the road policing unit, with which I work very closely. And the road policing unit deal with a lot of complaints from the public, particularly speeding, as you know, and other traffic issues. So we have had more officers come to the road policing unit, which is very good news for everyone. Last year, despite COVID, we ran a full programme of Fatal 4 operations across Leicestershire and indeed the force area. And just as a brief reminder, that includes drink drive, non-use of the seatbelt, distraction and speed. I've really just wanted to say that the Christmas campaign on drug driving, we had the highest number of arrests that we've ever had whilst we've been running these campaigns, with 170 odd drivers arrested for either excess drink or driving under the influence of drugs. This is a massive issue for the Road Safety Partnership, not just in our force area, but across the whole of the UK. I don't want to dwell on it because there's a lot of work going on in the background, but I just wanted to mention it to you. We have a full programme of Fatal 4s this year, and we will be running them in all the county towns in Leicestershire, Hinckley, Colville, etc., etc. So you will be seeing quite a lot of activity as the use goes on. I want to briefly mention, Chairman, the review of the Community Speed Watch scheme, which has been undertaken by Leicestershire County Council in consultation with the police. Because of COVID last year, Community Speed Watch, which is very popular in our towns and villages, ceased last year, but I'm pleased to say that the County Council has managed to get it off the ground for this year, and we will be running 20 odd schemes starting this month and running up to the autumn, which is very, very encouraging. We have got, we hope, a streamlined back office system at Force Headquarters for the data from speeding drivers to be dealt with. So I'm very encouraged with that, because we will be sending a lot of warning letters out when these schemes come online. The first scheme is at Donisthorpe and Moira. The second scheme is at Kibworth, and the third scheme is at Belton. And I'll leave it there now, because there will be other schemes coming online. Chairman, how much time have I got?
You tell me how much you want and I'll tell you if you can have it, Mr. Compton.
Yeah, no. Can you give me another 5 minutes?
3.5.
3.5, right. Well, I didn't want to go without talking about the problem of lorries, which you've already discussed this afternoon. I deal with the weight restricted areas. Needless to say, we've got a lot of complaints coming in on the weight restricted areas. And just to reiterate, the way we deal with them now is on a proactive basis. If residents report the alleged brief to the County Council, they come to my office and we deal with them by making contact with the haulier, usually by phone, sometimes by email, and they are verbally warned about these activities. I like to think, with the umpteen schemes we've got across the county, that we've had a lot of success with this rather than indulging in prosecution. like you, I'm conscious of all the development that's taking place across the Force area, and this means a lot more activity on the roads with lorries. We are in touch with the main developers, and we like to think that the routing for these lorries is not going to affect our communities. But if it does, we're very quick to tackle this business and keep the problems for our communities down to an absolute minimum. Brief word about the Safer Roads team, which is important. We have a team of special constables that go out into the communities and deal with the complaints that councillors are receiving, particularly about traffic issues and, of course, speed. That unit now has its own vehicle, and I'm pleased to say that was given to the Safer Roads team by the Road Safety Partnership 2 years ago, and it's proved very important for our officers, our specials, to come on duty, collect that car and go into our communities. So that is a real positive. I'll just mention e-scooters briefly, Chair, because I know it's an important thing that is happening and people want to know what we're doing. It is a real problem for us across the Force area, and I know if we'd got time, you'd all say, well, scooters are whizzing around the towns, etc., and they're all doing that illegally, as you know. The only use in Leicestershire and Rutland with these machines is on private land. So every time you see one, they are illegal. We are trying to tackle it, but to be honest, it's a massive problem for the police. And I'm not going to sit here saying, you know, that we've resolved it, because we haven't. We've got another meeting next week to decide which way we go with e-scooters. We are waiting for the government to legislate and let us know what is going to happen with them going forward. But I understand we won't be told until 2024. So a lot more huffing and puffing, I'm afraid, Chair, on e-scooters. I briefly want to mention large load movements, abnormal load movements. Jana mentioned high speed 2 a couple of minutes ago. And I just wanted to say that you know that the factory at Melton Mowbray has just gone into production on producing the infrastructure for high speed 2, the current high speed 2 link in Birmingham. So, you know, unless there are changes, there will be a lot of movements on large lorries from the site in Melton Mowbray across the Force area, down the 46 and the 69 across to Warwickshire, only just to reassure people that we are on top of it, and we are liaising with all the stakeholders on this to keep the engagement going with the communities, to keep their hassle down to an absolute minimum. I think I'm going to leave it there, Chairman, but my concluding comments are, I want to thank all the councillors that I deal with and have dealt with for a number of years for the support that you've given us for road safety. It's very, very important, and everything you do, we much appreciate it, because going forward, we do hope that we can start tackling some of the casualties that we're getting on our roads, and it's great for the victims, it's great for the emergency services if we can reduce them. So thank you very much for giving me, I hope I've not gone over time, but thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you.
Mr. Compton, thank you very much for the information. And please accept my apologies for cutting you rather short, because I'm sure you're aware of the current weather conditions, and I'm just mindful that the staff and members need to get away safely. But thank you for the information.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Congratulate the officers on putting together a very comprehensive and detailed report, and thank you to the two presenters of the information here this afternoon. across the Beaver division and 12 parish councils, the number one issue is speed of traffic. I'm always trying to bring down the speed of traffic going through the villages and between the villages. Modern cars now, they seem to be quality made, very fuel efficient, very quiet, high suspension, and people don't realise the speeds they're going sometimes. You almost need to reverse it and make them more uncomfortable and less safe somehow. But on an aside, there were some changes to the highway code in the last couple of years, which gave more priority or awareness for pedestrians and put the car is king, but almost going into second place. Has that made any impact on the amount of pedestrians knocked over, or does it relate to any of the figures that were in this report? Thank you, Chairman.
Jenna, I don't know whether you can answer that, or Mr. Compton can add anything.
I can answer probably fairly quickly, Chair, because the figures are sort of working in arrears. We probably haven't seen any full impact of that. But we do, as a partnership, and we do here at Leicestershire, as Mr. Compton said, look at our vulnerable road user groups, so pedestrians in particular. And I think with any change, there comes, doesn't there, sometimes a little bit of confusion or risk around that. So if there is anything that comes through the figures, we'll pick that up and we will look at that as a focus going forward. And if Chair, if happy for you, if you're happy for us to, we could look at that when we bring the report next year, looking at that figure and that particular question.
Mr. Fillimore.
Thank you, Chair. I think, and it kind of goes back to an earlier conversation about socioeconomic shift behaviour. Because if I understand it correctly, not from this report, because of the move to work from home, the number of short trips is greater than it used to be, and the number of longer trips is less than it used to be in that weird pre-pandemic world. So I think for me, there's a bit of a learning curve here where we've got to get the new stakes in the ground for whatever the new normality is. Because, but I think just out of idle curiosity, as far as casualties, why was there a sudden drop in 2017, or is it that 2016 was abnormally high? I'm just really quick, because it suddenly goes bump. You might not know the answer, and I don't need a written report. It's just out of curiosity. So it's just observations. I think for all of us, I think we've just got to find out what the new norm looks like. So the next set of results will actually be quite indicative of what that post-COVID behaviour starts to manifest itself as. But great report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fillimore. Jenna?
Just going to confess, I've just double checked the reason for the drop. If I can update you before we finish, I will do, if that's okay. I wouldn't like to speculate because I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head.
I'm sure Mr. Fillimore will be okay with that. Yeah. Mrs. Ack.
Thank you, Chair. Really interesting report. I think it's always useful to understand what sits behind the data. You know, getting driven by data is I love data. I can't help it. One of the things that I thought was really interesting is how do we look at these data sets together rather than isolation. So we look at casualties, we look at where the cluster is. How then do we overlay things like lamppost knockdowns, highways maintenance that are caused by a road traffic accident? How do we lay that over the top? Because at the moment, it looks like the clusters are based on individuals that have been hurt rather than potential future risk areas. So things that, you know, they're bashing into lampposts very regularly, and therefore they may well not need to go to hospital, but it won't be reported as an injury at the moment, but there could be lots and lots of accidents at that location. So how do we overlay that data over the top? And I suppose the second thing, the interesting, you know, following on from the question that came in from a member of the public around switching over to walking, cycling, active travel, is do we look at the data in terms of the different use of the network, so the highway element, the pavement element, and the shared walking cycleways, and whether or not individuals are safer in their most appropriate a cycle, is it more safe to travel on a shared cycling route or a separate cycle path? What is, how do we detail that data, and is that data available? Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Zack. Jenna, can you answer that?
I can. So in terms of the kind of how do we overlay all the information that we have as a highway authority question, I think it is a really good question, and some of that in part does actually rely on good people we have talking to each other. So the people that go out and will replace your bollard if it gets knocked over, speaking to our traffic and signals team to make sure that, oh, I've been out twice here, what's happening? And some of it is that kind of communication. Where we look at schemes, so where we might notice a pattern from one end of that or the other, then we do go look at all of our information. So whereas we might only consider accident data in a technical form on there, we will also look at our inquiries. So if we have 20 inquiries saying we're concerned, say for instance, like we were talking about earlier on a petition, we can take all of that data. But I think it's probably fair to say that there is quite a heavy focus in there in terms of looking at what has happened in order to manage that, and that's partly because the way people behave when they travel, particularly when they drive, you can't always predict that. You see that perhaps when you see new schemes go in on the road network, but yeah, there is some absolutely attention to that bigger picture when we look at those areas. And I'm ever so sorry because now I've forgotten the second part of your question. Yeah, and that's something that the government has issued guidance on and is going to look also at issuing some more guidance on for more rural areas and market town areas. And I think we'll take that on board and looking at that, as we said, with vulnerable road users, pedestrians and cycling is clearly in there. It's, in all of our interests for the reasons we've spoken about, health, carbon, the rest of it, that we do promote and allow people to travel safely and actively. So we will look at that, and I think there are some new ways of thinking about that going to be coming out over the next couple of years. So but already with the data that we have, we do look for those patterns. So for instance, you're looking at changes in behaviour. We did see sort of that increased use of cycling when more people were at home during the pandemic, and so we took that into account as well. Just on the other question, Chair, if it's okay, just to confirm, and I think Graham's got his hand up as well, he may be able to do this. The 2016-17 change, there was a change in the way that we reported data information, so there was a proactive need to report collisions at that stage. So we re-baselined our approach and comparison at that point. So that's why you get that anomaly in there.
Thank you, Jenna. I can't see her. Is Graham wishing to speak? Yeah.
Thank you,
Graham,
Chair. Just a quickie, Chair, on the highway code changes. The Road Safety Partnership have been very supportive of the changes and the hierarchy involved, which now puts vulnerable road users at the top. And I just wanted to mention our ongoing, what we call the Share the Road campaign that we've now run for the last 2 years, which is specifically aimed at horse riders, pedal cyclists and pedestrians. And I think most of you will know we've put signs up across Leicestershire at vulnerable sites, drawing attention to the campaign and asking drivers particularly to give these vulnerable people more space when they're overtaking. And the feedback on this campaign has been excellent, and we just hope that what we're doing is actually comes forward in the next lot of figures this year on casualties in this difficult sector. But as I say, it will be ongoing, and we're going to be running it now through the end of this year and into 2024. I just thought it was an interesting one to mention, Chair.
Thank you for that, Mr. Compton.
Thank you.
Comments? Mrs. Zack.
It was just whether or not the information about weight restriction complaints do they go into CSE members, or could we get a bit of information about that? Because I've just been dealing with them myself. I didn't know there was a department that would deal with it for us. So thank you. That would be helpful.
Okay, I'm sure Janice taken that on board. Yeah. Okay. So, Mr. Compton, thank you for your attendance. You're more than happy to stay for the rest of the meeting before I move on. But thank you very much. So I'm going to now move on to item 11 of the agenda. Highways and Transport Performance Report, December 22. These are on pages 157 to 168 of your agenda pack. Pat Clark, Assistant Director, will present the report supported by Nicola Truslove, Service Development Business Partner. So, Pat, no pressure. Last item.
Thank you, Chair. I heed your comment there. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. The purpose of this report is to provide the latest performance information on our key performance indicators up to 2022. There are 18 performance indicators that we measure through the year for highways and transport for the highways and transport area. These are aligned to the County Council's strategic outcome frameworks. Overall, where we are compared to, we compare really well against other local authorities, with 12 of our indicators in the top quartile. Out of the 18 indicators indicated in the report, 9 have been updated, for which I will take you through this afternoon. For our strong economy, transport and infrastructure outcomes, there are 5 indicators that were updated in quarter 3. We've heard about local buses, but in the report, our local passenger journey originating in the authority area has declined in performance slightly by 2%. The number of park and ride journeys saw an improvement in performance. The latest data shows an increase of 20%. We do believe that these are heavily affected by the COVID return. All 3 road condition indicators had similar performance to last year. The percentage of principal classed roads where road network where structural maintenance should be considered remains static at 2%. The percentage of non-principal road classed where structural maintenance should be considered is static in performance, but has moved by 1% to 4%. The percentage of unclassified road network where maintenance should be considered has slightly moved, but has improved by 1%. Although conditions of roads have met their targets and show steady performance, these KPIs only show a proportion of the road network. Therefore, we continue to be concerned about the rising condition of our ambers in our road networks across the authority, across the county. Under the safe and well outcomes, we do measure road safety. We've already heard a lot from Graham and Jana. Overall, Leicestershire is a high performing authority, reflected in the fact that 5 out of the road casualty indicators are in a top quartile when compared with other English authorities. In this section, we have 4 indicators updated since in quarter 3, up to September 22. The total number of casualties on Leicestershire roads improved by 6%. However, the total number of people killed or seriously injured declined in performance, and KSIs increased by 5%. The total casualties involving road users walking, cycling and motorcyclists, excluding cars, declined as well slightly in performance by 1%. And the number of people killed or seriously injured walking, cycling and motor, excluding cars, saw a slight decline in performance by 2%. Chair, I was going to leave it there as they are the headlines in the report. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, I appreciate that. Is there anything Nicola can add? Nicola?
I think that was a pretty good sum up, really. I think the main focus for us corporately is looking at those indicators that have fourth quartile positions or third quartile or anything that's not on track. So I think we've pretty much covered those in the update that that's provided. So there's nothing else that I'd add to that really. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that, Nicola. Thank you, Pat. Mr. O'Shea, Mrs. Wright, any comments?
No, I've got nothing to add. I'd just like to thank the officers and the team for the work that they do putting, the report together, and certainly, the road safety partnership. I've been to one of the meetings, and I can honestly assure you that they are a dedicated team, and I would like to thank the whole team of the road safety partnership as well, because our highways are and people's safety is a priority for the council and that team.
Thank you, Mr. O'Shea. Mrs. Wright?
Nothing to add, thank you, Chair.
You're a diamond. Thank you. Pat, thank you very much. Jenna, thank you very much. Nicola, thank you. I've got to thank our trusted scribe and organiser, Angie, for conducting the meeting extremely well today and preparing all the reports and paperwork. So thank you, Angie. Yeah. Join the mafia, Ozzy. I bet you got a Sam McGill behind the screen, haven't you?
I certainly haven't.
Yeah, I believe you. Okay, so that concludes today's meeting. Thank you all very much. Date for the next, well, it doesn't actually, it's concluded. I'm ahead of myself. Keith, you can stay seated for a moment. Date of the next meeting is scheduled for the 8th of June 2023 at 2 p.m. Item 13, any other items which the chairman has decided to take as urgent? There are no items. So thank you for attending, everybody, this afternoon. And I wish you a safe journey home. Now I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.